At the moment, the heat is being turned up for Squadron. That's a difficult thing to deal with in terms of we are so close to the community. This is from Sandy Roberts. And with all these events that we do, it's difficult as we get imminently closer to launch. And I say that in game development language. This being coming from Sandy Roberts, who is essentially number 2 in Star Citizen. And it's in an article that came from Variety reporting on Star Citizen crossing the $1 billion lifetime funding mark. Now, I think this article is really interesting, and I want to dig into it a little bit from the perspective of how much money they made, from the perspective of what these quotes from Chris Roberts and Sandy Roberts are actually kind of saying about the future of this game, and just kind of the big information that's missing from here. So we're going to start out just kind of touching on the $1 billion because that's the most interesting part. Star Citizen has made $1 billion, and it's come in 14 years. So I don't know. What's that math? What's $1 billion divided by 14? Probably about 74 million, 71 million. Is that right? I don't know. I don't think I used enough zeros. They've probably averaged around, $71 million a year making over the 14 years. That's not like a crazy amount for probably what a lot of people are thinking from this company, but it is a lot for an independent game producer, and it's definitely a lot for somebody who hasn't necessarily launched a project. I fully understand that. So I think that's what really turns people off the most first up. But let's talk a little more about like the details of this money. We do get their financial reports every year, so we can very easily follow how they're spending this money, what they're spending it on, who it's going to, who the big names are, how much money they have in holdings. For instance, we knew that at the end of 2024, they only had $5 million left in holdings. They have private investors that have only funded them to around the tune of $70 million. So about 1 year worth of funding, given their average. But they're still beholden to them for some funds. The interesting thing we went over in my video earlier this month, last month, is that they are holding off on a put option based on those funds. So we don't know what that means behind the scenes, but it's certainly interesting in this context. They also are doing really well. Like this passing 1 billion is not just kind of a trickle along. If we go to their current funding, get ready, because it's a little crazy. They are basically, like 2 days ago, I think maybe 3 days ago, I was like, are they going to pass their big funding goal for this month? Which before 2026, their biggest month of funding was May of 2025. Well, also I think November of 2025. But their best May of funding was also in 2025. That was 29 million. So they had to beat 29 million. Their best month ever was 32 million. So for good record, let's beat 32 million. Folks, it is currently May 25th. There's still 2 days left on this sale. They have made $35 million this year. This month. Not only that, if you take away their most successful year prior to this, which is 2025, and look back in the records, you can see that they are at October levels of funding in their previous best year. So they're doing great. CIG is doing phenomenal. This is in no way a failure for them business-wise. And so that's great. That's good for them there, right? But this is also happening kind of on the back of a pretty bad patch launch and pretty bad ship launches. Ships are the things people are paying money for, technically. And when they release Broken, it's just, this doesn't feel as good to the people who want to like cheer this on, you know? Either way, they are doing very well. That much is very good to know. Now, this money, as I said, is not just going nowhere. They spend a lot of it on their employees. Most of it, in fact. Salaries are generally what most of the expense is for people. I'm not sure I can find that very quickly. I don't want to sit on that very much. But as I said, you can come in and you can see what the costs are, where they're going. It's not super exact. There are some things that are missing, but here, for instance, we could see the number of employees from 2023 to 24. You can even see where those numbers changed and how the salaries and wages changed. So information is there for you to find if you want to. But that's not the big kicker. The big kicker is that the framing of this article is entirely around the $1 billion. You notice what's missing from this? There's no release date here. And in my opinion, given everything that we've been following, and I'm going to go over all of this and how it should be leading to a release date, this was kind of the time. But let's look at the quotes real quick. Let's talk about what they've actually said. That's the real meat of this article, because for the most part, this is targeted towards variety, average readers that aren't really keeping up with Star Citizen too much. The interesting bits are what Chris and Sandy specifically say. So let's go through these quotes. The first one is from Chris here. He says, "I think that the goal that everybody is supporting is pretty ambitious and huge, but also pretty exciting one. A lot of people want to spend time adventuring out in a virtual world of something that's like Star Citizen, and that's really what's helped us get to where we are, because the dream's so big that it's something that you don't get in any other game." So, Chris in his sentences. "It's not something that would be able to be done under a traditional big game publisher funding it or private equity. They usually wouldn't have the time and the patience. But with what we're doing, people just want to see the biggest, best world possible, and they love the idea of the dream. And as we're going along and they see more of it, it reinforces itself, basically. I fully believe that we've still got a long time, even after we've got what we call 1.0 out, and we're not considering an alpha anymore. That we'll be adding..." Jesus Christ. It's hard to follow. Okay. "I fully believe that we've still got a long time, even after we've got what we've called 1.0 out, and we're not considering an alpha anymore, that we'll be adding and building on the universe and the world, and it will be for a place for people to adventure together and meet up together and have fun together." That, dude, not too different than, say, World of Warcraft, which has been going on for 20 plus years after its release. Editor must have been like, how do I get this down? That's a hard sentence. Anyways, the meat here is he's talking about what we've already known, most of us. They are not stopping at 1.0. If you go to their roadmap, you can see very clearly that a lot of the things that they've talked about are not on the 1.0 roadmap. You can click through all of this, and there's plenty of core tech, plenty of interesting stuff, but it's not all there. Most notably, AI crew. NPCs on your ship doing things for your ship. But that's not the only thing here. There's also, he speaks some truth here. The idea that everybody is seeing stuff and reinforcing their ability to do more is what we saw exactly happen last year. This year, 2025, happened because they reinforced the thought process in everyone's head that they were actually building a game instead of a list of features. They brought content in, they focused a little bit on crash fixes, making the game a little more playable. You can, say to whatever level you think it was more playable. Fact of the matter is, their focus in 2025 was, yes, building Squadron 42, but in the meantime, using that as a chance to kind of build some confidence around the game, and it worked. And I think it will continue to work here, as long as they use the tech preview and stop releasing things like 4.8. Anyways, let's continue on, though, to the next quote, which is from Sandy Roberts. She said, "We did a lot of AMA Reddits in the beginning and a lot of forums, and they voted on things. And we did a lot of shows showing the open development and the real nitty-gritty of how things are made. It's not the most exciting topic sometimes because things don't move fast in video games, but I think that's been really exciting and interesting for the community, and we also involve them a lot. A lot of the developers, they go to these bar citizens, so we have 300 plus of those a year, and those are events organized by the community, and they're all over the world. I just came back from one in Asia and had a couple thousand people. It's been all set up by the fans, so I think that's something that's been really special with..." Thank you, Ad. "Really special with us a really long time. Sometimes I get in and play with them. I've made quite a few friends around the world through the game." This actually feels like the most substantial quote, not because it's any new information or anything, but I feel this is the only thing that they say in this whole article that's an actual stat. They really could talk about concurrent players. They just broke their concurrent player record for DefenseCon, right? They've got great concurrent players. When I go on Twitter and I see people discussing Star Citizen, I see them telling other folks that we've got good concurrent playership. There's 20, 30, 40, 50,000 players coming on every day. And I'm like, why don't they just use this number, man? I'm not going to say that they're lying, but they could give people a lot more to chew on in terms of like, oh, folks find this interesting. Even just to say 10,000 people a day are logging in and playing this game. A lot of people, especially who are reading Variety, probably think there's nobody playing. So I think this is a good quote. 300 plus in-person events over a game is tangible. Something you can write about at least. Still, not really all that newsworthy. Another quote. They get a little bit more interesting here. The article author, Jennifer Moss, thank you so much for writing. The article author said, it's on the topic of Squadron 42 that Squadron 42's development where Cloud Imperium becomes tight-lipped and the transparency the team is known for is swapped out for a classic veil of video game production secrecy. We know this well. Squadron is a little different, this is from Chris, because we are developing that more traditionally, where that's behind the closed doors, but a lot of the game systems and the technology is in Star Citizen. So Star Citizen is a nice way that we could say, okay, that works, that doesn't work, oh, this works under stress, this doesn't work on scale, and then Squadron itself is a much more authored single-player story as opposed to being multiplayer. Because it's literally just an authored single-player story, the fidelity and the attention to detail to the story and the environments and the progress we do, it's always going to be higher than it can be in Star Citizen. Star Citizen is wide and expansive, and you can go to different star systems and planets, and so you can't carefully craft every single second of the experience, but you can in Squadron. I still expect to have my good box delivery missions in Squadron, though. So this quote is, again, it's something that we're all pretty well aware of. Squadron is more behind closed doors. The way that, though, he's kind of angling it is that Star Citizen, like this talking almost sounds like Star Citizen can be a testing case for Squadron, even though it's kind of the other way around. They develop things in Squadron, then they bring them to Star Citizen eventually. Much harder to get running in Star Citizen. Not too much of a quote. Let's move on. Now, this is an interesting one. He says they're in the closing stages of development. It also makes an interesting comparison. He says, my pitch is basically, you're the star of this huge blockbuster event movie, and it seamlessly goes between the storytelling and the cinematic moments to you being in control and first person and pass it. Moving through the story and has a level of detail and scale and scope that you don't normally see in a game. Okay. It feels pretty epic. I'm actually very excited for Wind People because we're right at the end now. We're in the closing stages and it's coming together really well. I've been very lucky as a creative because I've had the ability to take the time and have the funding to really do it. James Cameron had that when he was doing his avatars. This is sort of like my version of it in games where I've had the time. I've been able to spend the time to get the tech, and so the vision that's being delivered is really my imagination, my vision from the beginning. And that's not something you always get the chance to do, so I'm pretty grateful for that. And also, I'm very excited for people on the outside to experience it. Comparing yourself to James Cameron is probably never a good idea, because the bar is pretty high for that man. I get the idea, though. When James Cameron wanted to make Avatar, he spent like 10 plus years developing the cameras and the tech to actually make the movie. And in that time, he wasn't doing anything else. But James Cameron also was like still delivering a lot of great things. Now, Chris Roberts got his pedigree. Wing Commander and Freelancer are very celebrated games. I just feel like for the people who are reading Variety, they're going to see you compare yourself to James Cameron and they're going to be like, well, okay, then let's see. Because Chris also compared the game's launch personally to himself last year to GTA 6. So he's like really kind of hyping it up in these real subtle ways. More interestingly, though, here is his talk around the release again. Let me go back to the fact that this article came out at the perfect time to announce a release date, and its main focus is the money. To me, it comes off as CIG knew that there were going to be articles coming out about the funding of the game, about them passing $1 billion. If I was on their marketing team, I would say, okay, let's do an exclusive deal with one of the big publishers who's going to be covering this. Now Variety puts out their big hit. They say they got an exclusive. This is the one that's cited everywhere. This is the one that gets shared. This is the one that builds the momentum. And this is the one that worked with CIG on the messaging. And the messaging was basically them able to say that they have $1 billion and get a few quotes in, but really skirt by the fact that there's not a release date here. Chris Roberts says, we're right at the end now. We're in the closing stages and it's coming together very well. Sandy Roberts also says down here, as we get imminently closer to launch, and I say that in game development terms, it's very hard to keep it under wraps, so the marketing campaign for Squadron is quite different from Star Citizen. It's going to go for broader audience, but I'm excited for the community to get on board, and they're very keen because they've been with us for so long on Star Citizen, they really feel like they're part of it, which they are. As for them to sing from the rafters that Squadron is launching, I think is going to be an exciting moment. Yeah, I do think. Let's go to, this is a little page I've been using to track like the posts and stuff they've been doing. We saw that they got a whole booth out at one of the conventions lately. They were bringing in big streamers like Esfand and other folks who were walking by, giving them the full sales pitch, getting them on the game, getting more casual marketing done, I felt. And then this article from This Week in Video Games, which is SkillUp's channel, also made a little bit of waves. Wasn't a huge article, but also came out, had a direct quote from Chris Roberts. He was saying, let's see if I could find it here. He said, we're going to get Squadron out first. The plan is for the end of this year, but there's a certain thing in the industry that we, like everyone else, we have to pay attention to, so I can't 100% guarantee it. He's talking about Grand Theft Auto 6. Interesting thing here, though, is this was an interview done back in February, as I said somewhere up here. In February, he was definitively saying the plan is for the end of this year. Now we jump forward to this time when I really do feel like they had the opportunity to say something specific about the release. And instead he's saying we're in the closing stages. So they're like simultaneously kind of telling us that like, okay, we're getting close. Things are good. It's imminent. But they cannot say this year still. And given that it's May, right? Next week is June. I would say 6 months maybe for a marketing event. You're not going to launch in November, December because Grand Theft Auto, and it's just not like the amount of money that CIG would have to spend to advertise this well in November in the lead up to a December launch doesn't make sense, especially because it's holiday season. It just doesn't make sense. This would have been the time, in my opinion, to announce a release date. The only other thing I could consider would be Summer Games Fest. It starts on June 5th, which makes a ton of sense calendar-wise to announce a release date because that's, June 5th, July, August, September, October. That's 4 months you're giving yourself, which is not very much time, but really it's the minimum amount of time I can imagine. Maybe Jeff Keighley gets up on stage and does an announcement. He tweeted about it. I poked him. I'm like, hey, dude, maybe you want to tell us something about this on the stage or something? But the way from the talk in February now to this article here and the way that they're it seems like they're hedging a little bit. The fact that they just passed $1 billion on the back of an event that is ending in 2 days. So this is, a really hyped time right before Summer Games Fest to kind of build in community hype to on-ramp another group of people once Summer Games Fest makes the announcement. It's not looking good timing-wise. Now, they have their financial report where they did say, I think they said it here somewhere. So in their financial report, they did still say that they were aiming for 2026. This is basically one of the only places we have it in writing, besides the trailer, targeting 2026, followed by 1.0 multiplayer. That's not really saying too much, though. There's also the newsletter that they sent out at the beginning of the year, which is still targeting the 2026 date, as you can see down here. But honestly, besides all of that, there's not a lot that points to 2026 still being for sure, especially considering the way that they're talking about this stuff. That's my look at this. That's my take on it. They passed $1 billion. They're doing very well for themselves. They're making a lot of money. They're doing it hand over fist. They released the Odin. That obviously made them millions of dollars in a day. And, you know, they know how to run this business. As I've been saying over the past week, though, they really need to get straight on the fact that they are not running this like an alpha. They're running it like a game. And they can't ignore the people who are playing it as a game. I was of a different opinion up until 4.0, even last year to some extent. But at this point, the marketing, like, I think that they are doing some big marketing pushes with this kind of stuff. And maybe they're not starting their marketing campaign for Squadron, but there's no denying that these types of things are angled towards people who are not in the Star Citizen community. And that's because CIG is trying to get people from outside of the Star Citizen community to play. And if they want that to work, they need to make a game for people not in the Star Citizen community. So I don't know what exactly their play is here. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm just trying to share with you what I saw from this article, the news that we've gotten with this variety piece, and thoughts going on from here. I'll leave you with this. Generally, whenever we pass a big funding milestone or a big moment in tech or something that needs to be addressed, we get a letter from the chairman. I would have expected a letter from the chairman when they passed $1 billion, with Chris personally telling us in text when the release date was. We haven't gotten that yet. We're probably going to get one, though. And I'm thinking that might be where they do it. That might be where, if there's a delay, they might, you know, softly let us know that it's going to come in Q1, Q2 of 2027. And I think it would be very funny if that letter from the chairman lands after DefenseCon lands, after it's over. We'll see, though. We'll see what they do. I'd be surprised if we don't get a letter from the chairman. I'd be surprised if we don't hear something about Squadron 42's release date in the next 2 weeks. Check back on it soon.